Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's masterclass with HelpBnk. Today, we're talking about influencer marketing. My name is Francesca Scambler. I am the Managing Director and founder of District, and I'm joined today by my colleague Lily, who is a talent manager and represents some of the talent on our roster.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet you.
So, quick whistle-stop tour on District. We are a talent management company. We represent influencers, musicians, actors, all of whom have built an audience online via social media. They create content and have created a community. And we are onboarded onto those people's careers to help commercialize, develop, and protect their careers. And a huge part of that is brand partnerships. So we thought that would be useful to you and your businesses and the community. And today, we thought we would go through frequently asked questions when it comes to influencer marketing and answer those questions from a talent manager's perspective.
Let's jump right in at the deep end because it's such a huge topic. So big question for you, but what is influencer marketing?
So we have been talking about this a lot over the last 48 hours of what is the actual definition of influencer marketing. And we've come up with a little bit of a definition that we think that it kind of summarizes it, but we think it's the act of integrating a brand's product or service into an influencer's content to ultimately achieve some of those marketing objectives that you're trying to hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the act of influencer marketing has always existed. It's just kind of in the last decade actually been given a term or even a job title, really, because ultimately all it is one individual influencing the purchasing decisions of somebody else, and everybody in the world has the power to do that. I can impact your decisions, you could impact mine, but an influencer has just built an engaged community of people that are genuinely listening to their recommendations and making their purchasing choices based on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think influence is a product of good content, and we've been influenced for so long. Like, we always look at the royal family. How many of your wives or parents or whoever had Princess Diana's haircut when she was super popular? We're always looking for people with authority or people with presence or entertainers who influence us. So this is just a different form, a different media. We're utilizing social media instead just to get that inspiration and that influence.
Absolutely.
So why is influencer marketing important for business, Lily?
I would say that whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, we are such a savvy generation now, and ultimately people buy from people rather than buying from big corporations and big brands. They don't want to be sold to, but they want to buy. So I think influence marketing is so important because it allows brands to actually have their products brought to life and integrated into someone's lifestyle, so that as a consumer you can genuinely see how that product will fit into your life, what the benefits are going to be, how you're going to utilize it. And I think it's just about bringing that whole thing to life and making it really real.
It's definitely, I think the key is social media. It's social, so it's a two-way dialogue, which is a really unique position to be in, rather than a dictation and a broadcast of something that's being sent out to that person on the other side. It's a conversation. Absolutely. And a two-way one as well, which is really unique. So how would we find the right influencers for our brand?
God, I mean, there's so many out there now, let's be honest about it. But I think ultimately the platforms want you to be able to find the right people talking about the right topic for you. So almost every single social media platform now has SEO built into it. So if it was me and I, for example, was running a restaurant and I wanted to become the it place in London for date night, I would go to TikTok, YouTube, Instagram and search those key terms. And it automatically brings up the profiles that are creating content around that topic, talking about it or engaging with it as well. So my first point of call would always be that. Go to the platform, search and engage. But also my second thing is just jump into the platforms, exist and be present on there, because the more you consume, the more you're understanding it, the more the algorithm will also understand what you're looking for and recommend that content to you without you even necessarily having to search. And I think that that is such an incredible way to be able to access all these different people talking about whatever topic is relevant to you. You can quite literally just search for it on the platforms. There are so many other external platforms and tools available, but we find that a lot of them come at a cost, which as a startup ourselves, we just can't part ways with right now. But yeah, there are external tools that you can pay for that will help do that research for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think as well, just on that point, sorry, just to go back, I do think if you are operating as a human when it comes to your brand, you're going to attract that community and those clients. So 100% just start uploading content and being involved in those conversations, and it's social networking at the end of the day, and it's building that ecosystem online. So you can start finding the right people by being involved in those conversations.
One thing I would add to the end of that as well is don't just look at the type of influencer and the content they're creating, but also make sure that you are, once you've kind of identified a few key people that you think might be right, make sure you're actually reaching out to them and getting data insights and making sure that the audience that they're talking to are also right for you, because there's only so far an actual influencer can go without their audience being the right people for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what are the different types of collaborations?
God, there are so many different ways that you can partner with creators, and we see it every single day. But in terms of putting it onto a little bit of a spectrum for you, I would say the kind of entry level into relationships with influencers normally tend to be the gifted opportunities. So you send your products out to a list of influencers that you've done your research on, you think they're going to be interested in it. You reach out, you get their addresses and you send it to them. There's no guarantee they're going to talk about it. There's no kind of contractual obligations. There's no messaging that you've shared with them or anything like that. It's quite a risky business, but can also be super, super successful if you do find the right people that organically talk about your product. And that tends to be kind of where a lot of relationships start or how they kind of begin. But then at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you can partner with a talent that quite literally becomes integrated into the decision making of your business and can help form marketing strategies and really join their world and your world together. A really strong example of that is Molly May, all those years ago, a couple of years ago, becoming the creative director of Pretty Little Thing. She had started out as their kind of fashion girl, just creating some Instagram content for them. And then she was literally hired as an in-house role, making their marketing strategies for them. And that's still an influencer collaboration. So you've got to fall somewhere in between the two. And we see a lot of brands reaching out and going, okay, I've got X products and I want 1 times TikTok, I've got X amount of money, please can you create this content? And that's kind of it. That's fine as well. Like we do those every single day. And then there's somewhere in the middle again of licensing deals, which you are the queen of.
Love a licensing deal.
Yeah, where someone's image or name will be used on your products in store, online, or anything like that. So they're not necessarily involved in the internal decisions, but they are heavily associated with your brand elsewhere.
Yeah. So how would you go about approaching an influencer for a collaboration?
Again, platforms are your friends here. Like every platform now pretty much has contact buttons, email addresses, or makes it available for people to advertise where they want to be contacted. So that would always be my first point of call, is once you've identified the people you want to work with, go to their bios, go to their contact pages and make sure that you are reaching out to the email address that's there. If for whatever reason it's not there, I would then go to DMs, but just bear in mind that a lot of the time those messages aren't being managed by the person that you want to speak to. So just always have that front of mind when you are doing that. But then also I think something that again is sometimes missed is a lot of creators these days are managed by the same houses or managers know managers. It's a crazy small industry, even though it feels like there's so many people in it. So the chances are, if you familiarize yourself with the key management houses in the area that you're looking at, they're either going to be managed by them or they're going to know each other. So they can always make introductions. And this, like the HelpBnk community and network is such a good example of that. And it operates very similarly in our world too, of, being able to make introductions and help people get to the right place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously you found your key influencer that you really want to work with, and the $1 million question is, how much are they going to charge me for a post?
Yes. So for some reason, this question is quite a taboo topic in our industry. No one really gives like a very clear answer, and quite often we have press ask, well, how much money do you make? How much are you generating per year? How much can I pay you to do a post or whatever? And I think for us, I'll answer on behalf of District. We don't tend to really look at any partnerships that are below £1,000, and that's for two reasons, really. The first one is there are overheads associated with creating content. It's the same as if you went to a production company or someone like that. The stuff that the videographers, the cameramen, so that's the same thing. Editors, bookkeepers, everything that goes into that partnership is an overhead, and we need to cover that. But secondly, we also have a roster that have partnerships that sit above that payment threshold. We've done partnerships with other talent up for millions of pounds as well. So it is a very big scale, and it always depends on the scope of work and how much you want to be integrated into that talent's world. So what I will say though is value is not always financial, and we should definitely be having more of a collaborative conversation up front when you do want to work with a talent. We always have this framework where we kind of like pivot between these few things. And the first one is fee. Of course, if you are paying market rate and it fits with if your product fits in with the talent's marketing strategy, of course we're going to do that. But secondly, is it a favor? Do we want to have like a bit of a value exchange? Are we helping you out in one area, but you're going to help us out in another? Or maybe you have a favor for the audience that can help out there. Can I close that? How do I close this? Yes. Sorry guys, we get very distracted. So yeah, are we learning something? Are you offering a product or service that we're trying to gain insight into? Are we trying to elevate our profile? Is it a profile building opportunity? Do you have something where you can provide accolades or something that the talent are striving and trying to achieve? And you don't unearth these value points unless you're having that conversation up front. So I think one of the value pieces that I would suggest is that you really take a good look at your ecosystem and your network and your offering, and try and figure out, how can I beef up my offer if the finance isn't up to the mark of a deliverable and how much that costs?
I think one thing to bear in mind is that influencers are real human beings. Like, they have genuine expenses and external things that will affect how much they charge. So it's never one Instagram post equals X amount of money. Like, everything goes into it, whether that is, are they shooting it themselves? Do they need a videographer? Do they need to go to a location? Do they need childcare? All those things. So I think the reason it isn't spoken about so much is more so from that perspective as well, of you can't say it and then change your mind and charge something differently to somebody else. And we've also done partnerships that look very similar on paper and are worth hundreds of pounds, and then a very similar partnership again that is worth thousands. So it really does just depend on what's going on. But as Fran said, we're kind of looking at minimum £1,000 and then up to the millions. You can get a lot of UGC creative content for a lot less than that as well, but I would say that falls into a completely different category.
Agreed. So how do we measure success?
So I would personally say that needs to be defined before you even start thinking about what kind of creators you want to work with. Like, why are you actually wanting to do influencer marketing, and what does success look like to you? So make sure you are having that conversation before you even start choosing your talent, because different talent will play different roles in that success measuring. So just make sure you understand what it actually looks like to you before any third parties or any opinions start kind of feeding into what you're doing. But again, I feel like this is my answer to everything. Platforms are wanting success, so there is so much data available. So make sure that your partnership doesn't end when the content goes live. It needs to continue after that, and make sure you are asking for insights. Every single platform has insights available on almost every single piece of content that can go out. So make sure you're asking for that. One thing I would also say as well is make sure you're actually active when your brand partnership goes live on social media, because you want people commenting, you want people asking questions and feeling like that actually going to get a response from you, because that's also success. If they're directly engaging with you, you can learn so much about your consumer at that point. So I would say that as well, but also make sure that you don't go into partnerships thinking, oh, I want sales, so I'm going to ask for 1x TikTok. Ask the creator that you're working with how they can best help you get sales, because your content output versus what they might suggest might be completely different. And my gut is trust the creator to tell you how they can get your KPI achieved, rather than you telling them you want sales and asking for a particular piece of content.
Absolutely. One of the ways that a guideline that we like to use, and it's difficult not to put talent into pools, but a bit of a framework to kind of use is we use this triangle effect. So the first one is profile, high profile talent, typically your household names, who are often being mentioned in third party content such as press. Maybe they're on TV, they have that bit of that limelight broadcast appeal. They are going to essentially help you with your Google searchability and your backlinks. If your product or your brand is mentioned in an article, you essentially have multiple parties at play here, kind of festering this Google jump. So the first one is the third party broadcaster or the publication that's mentioned you, the talents, you've got the talent's name associated with that. So when they Google, maybe you've got a makeup product, maybe they Google, well, what's so-and-so wearing on the red carpet? That's just one example. And then you've also got your platforms as well, the brand's platforms. So all of those parties coming together, you're creating this little sweet spot in the middle of how you're all collaborating. Then this corner, I should have a little diagram. This corner is your potent talent. This talent can move traffic, and they can move traffic to your website. They can move traffic to your product. They know they can move traffic because they have fostered a community of people who are coming to them for a specific type of content, a specific type of expertise, and they're trusting that when you suggest something, it's going to answer your question. So when you do partner with a talent who is potent, I would highly recommend that you collaborate again and ask them, how do you move traffic? What case studies have you done in the past? What sort of mechanism and content have you used to generate those results? We are this type of brand. Our audience tend to do this. And I think as well, stop putting the onus on sales as well, because the talent can drive traffic to your website. But then to me, it's then the brand's responsibility to ensure that you're capturing that traffic that is moving to your website, and having, again, another whole end of the funnel. If you're seeing influencer marketing as top of funnel, it's how are you moving them down through your business to ultimately convert that traffic into a consumer and an audience member of your own brand. And then finally over here you have your picture talent, your high production talent who create beautiful content. It's often storytelling pieces. It's content that really captures the emotion, it connects with you. It's quite often much higher quality content, and will come with production costs attached to it. You can use qualitative data here, like really look into sentiment building and see, okay, what sort of comments are coming, who is attracted to my brand and who's connecting with it. And all of that is underpinned by all the data that comes from all the platforms again. So it's asking for those stats, and it's having either an amalgamation of all of them, or knowing when you go with a high profile talent, you're hitting X, Y, and Z objective. With a potent talent, that will be ABC objective. It's going to be completely different, and they kind of shift. It's very rare that you find a talent that's all three. If you do, they're a bit of a unicorn and they're going to cost you some money. And they don't have to have all three. You can pull and leverage different areas of talent within this industry.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point of don't just look at influence marketing as one thing, because every single creator that you work with will operate completely differently a lot of the time, and making sure that you recognize that you can't choose one talent and expect them to fit into all the categories. You have to really recognize which category somebody fits into before you go into the partnership with them, so that you, or when you're in the conversation negotiations with them, so that you're not expecting something that they genuinely know they cannot offer and they aren't the right partner for that. And I think as management, that's something we really pride ourselves on, is asking for KPIs before we start a partnership, so that we can genuinely say we're confident that you're going to have a good experience with our talent achieving this, because otherwise it's just not going to work. Which leads us on quite nicely into your favorite question. How can a brand or a talent ensure authenticity in their partnerships?
I loathe the word authenticity. And I think it stems from the fact that every time someone's asked, when you partner with a brand, what do you look for? And I just want to make sure it's authentically true to my brand, or it's authentically fits in. And I think the reason why I've got a problem with it is because that question, it has so much more depth to it, and no one's really like unearthed and explored the roots of what does authenticity mean. So for us, and for me, I'm speaking on behalf of you, for me, I believe that it's a value match, and it's doing that value solicitation through your research up front, and then when you're in communication with that talent. It's a hard question to answer, because a lot of talent, they go through so many changes and so many moments in their life, and their content will reflect that, unless they are playing a character and you are aware that that person is a facade, or maybe they're acting, it's very similar to that. And you're trying to partner with the values that come across to the community. And I think that's the identification that needs to be done up front and early on, because it's so multifaceted. You could be an authentic match for the person behind the camera, but not their character and their facade on camera. Or you could have been the perfect match for someone a year ago and then they change. And a good example of that is a makeup artist. Sorry, I keep using beauty. It's because Nick's behind my head. She's a makeup artist, has been a makeup artist by trade for many, many years, and then utilized social to amplify out her expertise into her community. She technically can promote any beauty brand, because she is finding within her community someone who needs that product and who will connect with that product. So maybe Nick doesn't have oily skin, but the product that she's promoting is perfect for oily skin, and the brand want to be exposed to the community of the people within her community, that have oily skin, and she's talking to them in that moment in time. She's not talking to the wider community, she's specifically talking to them. Maybe you're pregnant, and at that time you want to suggest a product to your community, but everyone who's followed you for something completely different, and now you just happen to be pregnant. Maybe that doesn't authentically match up to your community. So I think it's as I said at the start, long story short, it's a value solicitation, and make sure that is happening up front before you start moving forward. And even when you're in that partnership, those values can change as well.
100%. And I think one thing that I always find really interesting when it comes to this question is, I might have talent that genuinely uses a product every single day, and I will say to them, oh, X person has reached out and wants to work with you, and they're like, oh great, we use that every single day. But then it comes down to the brief, and they're like, oh, we want you to communicate some really intense messaging. Sometimes we see, and actually the talent turns around and goes, even though I genuinely use this product every single day, this brief just isn't right for me, because I don't talk like that. I don't communicate with my audience like that. I don't talk about those particular topics. It's just not going to work. So on paper, because you're in the background of their videos every day, you think, oh, it's a given. Of course, they're going to want to work with us. But actually, it comes down to the nitty gritty of the brief and the messaging and what you're actually asking of them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know it's a lot of information. So if you were literally starting out from the very beginning, what would you determine as an effective strategy?
Do you know what? I've been speaking to some friends recently who are startups as well. And I honestly think even though we have just tried, we're trying to convince you to work with influencers and we're trying to earn more money and make all this work. I think if I had no budget to work with an influencer and I couldn't afford at this point in my business to part ways with product, I would start being an influencer. I would make my brand as human as physically possible, and I would come out from behind the camera and I would start talking you through my service and talking about the values that your brand represent and the DNA, and create a bit of a heartbeat and a community. And I'd start talking about it, and I would do it through recognizing the type of consumer that I am trying to attract. I would create content that would be almost like a magnet to them. So if I was a dating service and I was trying to reach 25 plus people, I would start creating content that would be attractive to them. So maybe you start a dating show, you stand out on the street and you start matchmaking people in the street, or maybe you're doing memes of what it's like to be dating as a 25-year-old at the moment, or whatever it is. I would just start really creating a plethora of content that's attractive to that person. And honestly, I think with the algorithms of TikTok and everything, you just don't know what's going to happen. And if you're just speaking and having that voice, it's going to start nurturing engagement.
100%. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but you need to let the algorithm get to know you. Like that's something we recently learned, because we as a management house also need to be shouting about what we're doing, not just from a talent's perspective, but also from ours. And we were like, do you know what? We can't expect everybody else to shout about it. We're going to have to do it. But we were kind of logging into our district account just to post. And we were like, the algorithm isn't favoring us. It's not feeding us the right people, etc., etc. That's because we weren't leaning into it, and we have to give the algorithm time to actually get to know us as well. So we scrapped our personal profiles and we're like, right, let's start operating as districts, so that when we are then creating that content and wanting it to reach certain people, the algorithm knows us and knows what we're doing, knows what we're talking about, and knows who we want to reach. So I think that the platform is there to lean into and get to, like, they want to get to know you as much as you need to get to know people on the platform too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the legal guidelines when wanting to work with a creator?
Disclaimer, we are not solicitors, we do not have any legal qualifications or anything like that, but we thought it was important to bring this up because if you're gifting, if you're working commercially with a talent, I say talent, influencer, creator, whoever it is, if there is value being exchanged, it has to be disclaimed to the consumer. So if I am opening your Instagram story, if I am watching your reel, if I'm on TikTok, whatever platform it's on, if I haven't been alerted that it's a commercial partnership before I engage with that content, that's a no-no. And the Advertising Standards Agency and the CMA are there to protect the consumer. So we need that to happen, and we need them on board to be able to help us regulate this industry. So I would highly recommend you go onto the websites. There is so much knowledge on there, so many articles that you can read, previous examples and all of that jazz. And I would just go through that, just familiarize yourself with it all. And there's an amazing flowchart as well on the ASA's website where you can go through the flowchart and try and distinguish and decipher like whether or not your content needs add-on and how. So I would highly recommend you go onto that.
I think one thing to bear in mind, or two things actually. One is that those regulations always have to adapt to what the platforms are doing. So literally today, a new platform launched and has blown up.
It's very apt.
So those guidelines will be now being reviewed and adapting to what needs to happen on that particular platform. And even if it's just a software update that's introducing, like when stories came about and things like that. So just make sure that it's not like oh, I've read it once and I think I'm up to date and knowledgeable. You need to make sure that you're constantly, as the platforms change, you're also making sure that you are staying up to date with those things.
Yeah.
But secondly, also making sure that when you sign up to social media platforms, you're also signing up to their guidelines, which fall completely differently to the ASA and the CMA that Fran just mentioned. But you need to ensure that you're actually understanding how the platform themselves want you to be disclaiming your content on there. So because the platforms will give you crosses against your name and you will lose access to stuff if you aren't doing things correctly, because you have agreed to those terms and conditions and guidelines too. So just make sure you're always bearing that in mind as well. And I know it's a minefield, but actually once you start familiarizing yourself with it, it does feel quite natural.
Yeah, it's very natural when you get used to it. So which social media platforms do you think are most effective?
Unfortunately, every single one. I don't think any can be ignored. I think each needs their own strategy. And I mean, we feel it today, new platform launched and it's overwhelming. Like, what are we actually doing on here? What do we need our creators to be doing on here? How are we going to guide them through this? But unfortunately, every single one does play a role. And even if you can't figure out how to have active content on there every single day, how are you going to have people talking about you on each platform, and how do you want to be recognized on there as well? I think is so important.
Yeah, it's very easy. Like, you can assign purpose to each platform and a specific way that you communicate and what sort of community you think you've built on each platform. But I think as well, it's really useful to also partner with talent that you're not necessarily on. It's okay to abandon. Okay, first of all, get your handle on every single platform. Just secure that for your brand name and make sure you've got it. First of all, you don't even have to start uploading content to it. Just get it.
You don't want anyone else uploading under your handle that is associated with your business somewhere else. So just make sure that you're in control of that.
Yeah, that's for number one. And then secondly, you can use a good example of this is using Twitch and streamers on there. You can get them to promote your brand or service, but you don't need to be a streamer. You don't need to put your account, your brand up there if you don't want to. That's not something that you like. If it doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? If it doesn't cater to your brand, then don't bother doing it. But that person that you are trying to build a connection with might have a community that would really benefit from your product. So you should be aware of who's right on each platform for your product or service. It's quite often that a creator is quite omni-channel, so meaning they're on multiple platforms. So it would be rare if they were on Instagram, but maybe their most potent platform is another one that you're not on.
I think as well on that, like, creators are on every platform and so are consumers. So you need to touch people like in different ways across different platforms, because they're looking for different things. So just always bear that in mind when you're working with different people.
Yeah. So you can go through all of these partnerships, you can build these connections with people, but then sometimes there's some negative publicity or even controversy. But how would you suggest someone would handle those two things?
I think, again, spectrum seems to be my favorite word, but it is like, depending on the negativity and depending on how it kind of presents itself, there's different ways to handle it. I would say the kind of entry level to negativity on social media is people talking negatively about your brand, where you might have invited someone, in fact, you might have no relationship with the creator, but they have experienced your product, your brand, or service, and they take social media like everybody does these days and leaves a negative review or is talking about it negatively to their community. And I know that as a brand, that can feel really jarring and like panic mode of, oh my God, someone with 1,000 followers, 1 million followers is talking about our product negatively, and they're actually our dream target market. What can we do? We need to run away and deal with it. But actually, I would see that the complete opposite way. And we've spoken about it earlier, but social media is a two-way dialogue. Jump into that conversation and face it head on. That is free market research. Nobody is charging you for that. You have the ability to respond to those questions as a human. Like, don't just necessarily give like a customer service response. Like, be quite human about it and ask questions and genuinely be interested in their feedback, so that you can therefore adapt and change what you're doing. And I think that that's really important, because if that particular person is your target demographic and they aren't having a good time, something's going wrong there. So you need to use that to your advantage to learn and adapt from that.
Feedback loop.
Absolutely.
Negative comments is engagement. Like, it's still engagement. Not every, like, it doesn't have to all be positive.
Exactly. And then the complete opposite end of the spectrum of that is you have partnered with an influencer, content creator, or heavily associated yourselves with somebody, whether it's just for the last month, for the last year, however long. And like Fran spoke about earlier, all of a sudden it comes out that your values just completely don't align anymore. Whether they do align now and something they've done in the past means that you don't align anymore, or whatever that is. And a lot of the time, this is now kind of called cancel culture, and it becomes a little bit of a storm, whether that's just on social media, whether it's in the press, whatever that is. It feels like an absolute media storm, and it can be really overwhelming from the brand's perspective, from the creator's perspective, and the consumer. And I think my biggest piece of advice, and I know it's hard to do in the moment, is to take a step back and actually look at the bigger picture, do some research, have conversations, and learn about what's actually going on, what mistakes have been made, how they're going to be rectified, how the people feel about it. And my key thing is to respond, don't react. Don't let the pressure of social media and the storm coming make you react too quickly and say something that doesn't have genuine meaning behind it, or genuine actions off the back of it as well. I'll hand over to you for your favorite saying of all time.
Well, I would also say as well that make sure the pastoral care is in place as well. There is a mental warfare attached with cancel culture. And I mean, we've been unfortunate or fortunate for the experience. You can swing it both ways, to have experienced this scale in its entirety. And I think the pastoral care is something that needs to be integrated on all sides. So maybe your account managers, or maybe your staff members, or yourself, or the person who did the deal, and you're eating yourself up because you're like, why did I do this? I've unraveled everything that we've achieved thus far. So you need that pastoral care internally. The talent will need that pastoral care. The management, like, just all look after each other's mental well-being, and then and also in tandem attack that matter at hand. One thing that I will say is, if you do make a public apology, one of the things that really grinds my gears is when talent have to make a public apology and they say, I'm sorry, but, and then they give an excuse, but in the future I will try harder, or whatever that is thing after the sorry is, because it diffuses the impact on the sorry, in my opinion. I would highly recommend it is sorry and I will try and I will be putting these processes in place moving forward to ensure this impact is minimized, or whatever it is that is happening. I'll just be really, really mindful of your language, and I mean, don't overthink it, but in the moment, just make sure that you are moving forward and ultimately making sure everyone in, like, bring people in as well into this brainstorming session, bring charities, bring like, just try and get that information and data.
I think external perspective is sometimes really important in these situations, no matter where on the scale you sit, because it can feel so close to home and can be so emotionally fueled, but actually sometimes you do just need that kind of distance between the two to make the best business decisions moving forward, and 100%. Always making sure that you are comfortable and confident with the decisions you make, rather than rushing them and just doing it for the sake of it. That never means as much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And moving on swiftly, but taking all of that into consideration with everything that we've spoken about, obviously influence marketing is such a hot topic right now. What do you see the future of it being?
The future, my crystal ball. I'm going to focus on two things. The first one is, I think you are starting to see influencer personalities break the digital wall, and you are seeing that here in the UK, but you're seeing it more so in the US at the moment. You're seeing influencers sitting on the sofa, which is typically occupied by maybe an A-list celebrity or someone that is more mainstream and traditional. But they're coming on and they're talking about their content that they're creating. Maybe they've got brand partnerships that they're talking about. Maybe it's a product that they're launching, but they're launching it very direct to consumer, so they're owning the entire process. So I have a feeling when it comes to those sorts of talents, that's talking about the three sections again, and you talk about the high profile influencer talent, I have a feeling that you're going to start to see marketers and brands really think about omni-channel marketing. And so if you're on a billboard or you're in social media or you're on TV and your ads on there as well, I think there will be an entire landscape of media attached to that talent, with them leading it in the advertisement. The other thing that I think is going to start to unearth is the dual purpose content and going back to more of a product placement. And I think it's going to be hard to do, especially in the UK when there's like the ASA and the CMA. And I think a product of them coming on board has actually created a bit of a story arc within influencers content, where it goes organic content, commercial, and then organic. And I think if we can start to diffuse that break in the middle, for some people, I think that's going to start to happen. And I think one of the ways that we're seeing that is Sophia Richie is a really good example off the back of her wedding. She has been creating really in the moment content, and it is being done where she's maybe doing her makeup, but she's talking to you about something else. There's a story that's being told, and she's not going, I'm applying this bronzer to the high points of my face because it's like the sun is hitting my face. I'm talking to you about an emotional connection or a different thing that is happening whilst I'm applying my makeup, and you're mesmerized. You're watching her applying her makeup, but she's talking about influencer marketing or whatever it is. And another example of that is actually the split screen that you're seeing on TikTok, where the audio, and maybe on one side you've got footage and on the other side you've got a really lovely ASMR video of some sand. And I think because we are so fickle with our attention spans, that is working really well because our eyes are bouncing between the two screens, but the omnipresent audio over the top is going into our mind. So we're listening, but we're constantly flitting between the two things, but we're being engaged because one's kind of polarizing into the other. It's very relaxing, and then the other one is the content that we're trying to get. And I think if we can start forming emotional connections and stories with product and finding a way for marketers to maximize those opportunities, I think that's the next step of our world and our influence. But that doesn't mean there isn't space. Like that, there is the hard stop advertising. We have talent that do create ads, and it's very obvious when it's a brand deal, but it's elevated, it's their content, it's a skit or it's comedy, whatever.
I think storytelling is going to be such a key part. I don't think someone's going to just be able to come on camera and sell a product in any way, shape or form. I think it's going to really, even if they are doing that, there needs to be an emotional connection between that sale and like bring, whether that's nostalgia or whatever that may be. But I think there is going to really need to be that deepened connection there.
I think it's like the creators are gonna be creators, and that's where the cream will kind of rise to the top with this oversaturation of influencers. Is you're gonna have to start leveraging their ability to tell stories
100%.
and form connections, and then layering the brand connection into that as well.
Absolutely. That brings us to the end of our questions. I can see we've got a lot in the chat, but if you do have any further questions that we can't get to answer, then please feel free to reach out to us on our Instagram there, which you can see in front of you, or visit our website as well and fill out our form. We are very active on there too.
So I'm just reading through. the questions. This is quite difficult. I don't know how talent do it. If I was trying to start out as a fashion influencer, how can I catch the eye of brands? Should I reach out to them, and how do I work out my pricing, or should I offer free services to begin with?
Oh, I love that question. Can I take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
I would say, first of all, I would just create as much content as
we get rid of this. Oh, you can carry on. Actually,
I would just create as much content as you possibly can organically with the brands that you want to be working with. And I know that that can be really difficult in something like fashion, where it's so like you've got to have money to be able to buy the clothes, etc., etc. But we have a talent that actually creates content in store changing rooms, and it's like, come shopping with me in X store. She doesn't necessarily buy every single one of those products, but she's got an eye for fashion. She can really see it, and it kind of cuts that cash flow issue that I know a lot of fashion creators have. So I would say that, and make sure you are tagging them. Organic mentions. Do not expect the brands to see you without you constantly tagging them. Everybody now has the ability to link, so make sure you're linking out to products. There's also a platform called LTK, Like to Know It, which allows you to link out to a lot of the main fashion houses in the UK. So make sure you're on there, because it also actually allows you to earn affiliates on there as well, which can help with your cash flow when you're starting out. But I use that data every single day when I'm talking to fashion brands. I will go to the fashion brand and go, here's my talent. They spoke about your leggings on their social media and they sold X amount of units, or they had X amount of people click through to their Like to Know It. All of that is free to do, especially if you do it in the store changing rooms. There's nothing stopping you. So just make sure you're kind of taking advantage of all those things, because fashion, all they want is click through. So make sure you're feeding that. Pricing is really hard to give you advice on without knowing more about your platform and your audience. So reach out, and always happy to give a little bit of more specific advice when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good one. Do you have any experience with virtual influencers, e.g. animated characters?
Oh God.
No, not any personal experience, but just definitely a hot topic that we talk about on the regular. I think I can't remember her name. There is one of the first AI models on Instagram, her name will come to me in a bit. When she first kind of imploded onto the internet, we when we were in our previous management company, we were like, what is this and where is this going? And I think it's in a very interesting route to go down. I do want to kind of explore it a bit further and see how brands can start to utilize it. I think definitely with like the metaverse and the more AI based stuff, I think is definitely something that people will start to recruit those AI talent. And also I just find it fascinating. Like, I would love to create an AI version of one of our talent and put them into video games. I'd love to I don't know, I just think there's just so much, especially with high profile talent that have a community when it's probably more profile based and they're just obsessed with you and it's more lifestyle and you're not creating a specific expertise or niche. It's purely about your life, like daily vlogging. I think they should be characters in games. And I think as well with like filters, like makeup artists should create filters. And I just think there's so many ways to explore it.
Yeah, for me, I feel like there is a little bit of a lack of human connection, which I think is really important. But I think a lot of the time we fear things that we're not familiar with. So the more I see it, the more I'd probably connect to them a little bit. But right now they just stand out so much when I do see them that I'm like, oh, I don't know how I connect in the same way. But I'm sure I said that about TikTok all those years ago, and now I'm a TikTok addict. So
yeah.
I just saw another question there about how do you find the kind of key management houses? Google it, like literally Google top 10 UK management agencies and look at who they're managing, look at the kind of creators, TikTok search as well, ChatGPT, it all pulls through. Look at the industry awards of who's being nominated for what and make sure you're reaching out to them. It is all quite easily accessible. As I say, there is loads, but it's still really small, so it's quite easily
did you say look in people's bios?
Oh yeah, and
If
also look in
there's
bios.
if there's a talent that's similar to you and creating very similar content, look in their bio and see if they're managed. And there's some management houses who specialize in specific type of niches. So if you're a parenting influencer, or like whatever vertical you might sit in, that will probably cater to you better. But yeah, just honestly, everyone's talking on it, like they've all got social presence, so you can 100% reach out to them.
Yeah,
I think we've answered that.
yeah. A question about partnering with an influencer or a blogger, I would say that they're the same thing. Like it just depends on what output you want in terms of deliverables, whether you want something written, whether you want video, whether you want a still image. A lot of the time, like creators can do all of those things. So I just worked on a partnership, for example, with Post Office and TripAdvisor. A lot of it was video content on TikTok, Instagram, etc. But then they've also written a testimonial about their experience with Post Office that will sit as a TripAdvisor review. So people can tap into different parts of their ability and create content in loads of different ways. So I personally would say that they all fit into the same category.
Yeah, I also think as well, think again about your marketing outcome, because if you're trying to improve SEO, blogs are a really great way of doing that. Even if you had a video embedded into a blog, that on Google alone will help you rank in Google. So I wouldn't, like, a lot of people think that blogs are no longer relevant, but I completely disagree and think it's definitely a multiple platform conversation to have. Like if you can get someone to create a TikTok that's embedded into a blog, I think you're kind of winning then.
Absolutely.
You found another one, or you're
No,
good?
I haven't.
Does anyone have any other questions? Otherwise we will leave you to have your evening.
It's so hard to read that quickly.
I know.
But yeah, please feel free to reach out to us, district.global. And
yeah, we're trying to get to 500 followers on Instagram, so if you could give us a follow,
that would be really helpful.
That
question on a certain amount of followers, no, it depends what you're looking to do, and how. Obviously I personally, or actually both of us, we hate follow accounts. It's more about engagement and who your audience actually is, rather than the total amount of followers.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you gained some insight from all of our questions and answers to the questions, sorry, and we would love to connect with you on Instagram, etc. So please, yeah, do give us a follow and have a lovely evening. No, I've got to stop. I'm reading all the chat now.
Thank you so much.
Bye everyone. Bye.